The divorce papers landed beside my dinner plate with a soft thud. For a moment, nobody at the table moved. Not my husband, not my mother-in-law, not the family friends who had spent the evening laughing over expensive wine and pretending everything was perfect. The signature line was already marked. All that remained was my name. My husband sat there with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't guilty. He looked relieved, as if 20 years of marriage could be folded into a stack of papers and pushed across a table between appetizers and dessert. Then came the second betrayal. The woman sitting beside him reached for his hand, the same woman I had helped through the darkest period of her life, the same woman I called family, the same woman who smiled as if my destruction was part of the evening's entertainment. Everyone watched me, waiting for tears, waiting for rage, waiting for humiliation. Instead, I smiled. Then I reached into my handbag and placed a thick envelope beside the divorce papers. Inside was the deed. The one document that would change everything. The color drained from my husband's face. Suddenly, he wasn't smiling anymore. But to understand how we got here, we have to go back to the beginning. Looking back now, I realize the most dangerous betrayals never arrive wearing a villain's face. They arrive wrapped in trust. For most of my adult life, I believed I had won the lottery of relationships. My husband, Ethan, was everything people claimed they wanted. Successful, reliable, generous. The kind of man who remembered birthdays without reminders and sent flowers for no reason. Friends admired him. Neighbors respected him. Even strangers seemed drawn to him. Whenever people asked the secret to our marriage, I always gave the same answer. Trust. I trusted him completely. That trust had been built over 20 years. 20 years of shared dreams, shared losses, shared victories. We met when we were both struggling. There was no money, no luxury, no glamorous lifestyle. Just two ambitious people trying to build something meaningful together. The first apartment we shared was so small that the kitchen practically touched the bedroom. When it rained heavily, water leaked through the ceiling. We laughed about it. Back then, everything felt simple. Every success belonged to both of us. Not every setback belonged to both of us. When Ethan launched his business, I worked nights helping him organize paperwork. When I inherited a small amount of money from my grandfather, we invested it into growing the company. We called it our future. Not his, not mine. Ours. Over time, that investment multiplied. The business expanded. The money grew. The tiny apartment became a beautiful house, then an even bigger one. By our 20th anniversary, people viewed us as a success story, the kind of couple others wanted to become. That image mattered deeply to Ethan. He loved being admired. At the time, I thought it was harmless. Now I understand it was the first clue. People who need constant admiration often hide things beneath the surface. But I couldn't see that then, because trust has a way of blinding you. The other important person in this story was my younger cousin, Vanessa. She entered our lives permanently after a terrible divorce. Her husband had left her with debt and emotional scars. She was broken, or at least she appeared broken. I welcomed her into our home. I helped her rebuild. I found her a job. I paid some of her bills. I sat beside her during nights when she cried about losing everything. If someone had told me then that Vanessa would become the center of my worst nightmare, I would have laughed. She seemed grateful, loyal, almost sister-like. Whenever she spoke about me, she called me her hero. That word makes me sick now, because predators often praise the people they plan to use. Still, life continued. Birthdays, vacations, holiday gatherings, family dinners. Everything looked perfect from the outside, and that's exactly why nobody noticed the cracks, including me. The first crack appeared during a summer barbecue. It seemed insignificant, almost forgettable. Vanessa arrived wearing a necklace, a beautiful gold necklace. When I complimented it, she quickly changed the subject. Later that evening, I saw Ethan staring at it, not casually, not briefly. There was recognition in his eyes. At the time, I assumed nothing. Why would I? Married people notice jewelry all the time. The moment passed, or so I thought. A month later, I found the receipt. It had slipped from Ethan's jacket pocket while I was doing laundry. The necklace had cost nearly $3,000. The purchase date matched Vanessa's birthday. I remember staring at the receipt, trying to make sense of it, then immediately making excuses. Maybe it was for a client. Maybe it was a business gift. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. People don't like evidence that threatens their reality, so they invent alternatives. I certainly did. I placed the receipt back and never mentioned it. Looking back, that decision changed everything. Would you have confronted him right then? Or would you have trusted the person you loved? That's the first question I want you to remember, because my answer cost me dearly. Months passed. Then another strange detail surfaced. Vanessa began appearing everywhere. Family events, business celebrations, weekend trips, charity galas. Sometimes Ethan invited her before I even thought to. Again, it seemed innocent. Family members spend time together. At least that's what I told myself. But something felt different. A quiet discomfort settled inside me. Not enough to accuse anyone, just enough to keep me awake some nights. Then came the second clue, and this one was harder to ignore. One evening, Ethan left his phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. His screen lit up. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't searching for evidence. I simply glanced down. The message contained only 3 words. Thank you today, no name. Just a heart. My stomach tightened. Not because the message proved anything, because it created a question. And unanswered questions can be more terrifying than answers. I told myself not to overreact. I told myself trust mattered. I told myself good marriages survive insecurity. But doubt had already entered the room. And once doubt arrives, it rarely leaves quietly. The following weeks became a battle between instinct and loyalty. Every suspicious detail felt small. Every explanation felt possible. Nothing was definitive. Nothing was concrete. Yet the unease kept growing, like smoke drifting beneath a closed door. You may not see the fire, but you know it's there. Then something happened that changed everything, and it happened completely by accident. I was organizing old financial records when I discovered a property file. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, until I noticed an unfamiliar address. The property wasn't listed among our assets. I had never heard of it, yet large payments had been made from a shared account. Over several years, the total exceeded $500,000. $500,000. Gone. Quietly. Hidden. And somehow connected to a property I didn't know existed. My hands trembled, because for the first time, suspicion became evidence. Not proof of an affair, not yet, but proof of deception. Someone was hiding something, and that someone was my husband, the man I trusted more than anyone. The man who claimed transparency was the foundation of marriage. The man who looked me in the eyes every day and promised there were no secrets between us. I wish I could tell you that discovering the property was the worst moment. It wasn't. It was merely the beginning, because the truth waiting behind that address was far more devastating than anything I imagined. And before I uncovered it, another betrayal was already unfolding behind my back, one that would eventually cost my husband everything. The moment I found that property file, my entire world shifted. Not because I knew the truth, because I suddenly realized I didn't know my husband at all. For days I carried that discovery alone. I said nothing. I watched. I listened. I paid attention in ways I never had before. And the more closely I looked, the more impossible it became to ignore what had been happening right in front of me. Ethan's habits started making sense. The late meetings, the unexplained trips, the sudden need for privacy, the way he would step outside to answer certain phone calls, the way his phone never seemed to leave his hand anymore. Before, those things felt normal. Now they felt calculated. The address from the property file haunted me. I wanted answers, but I also feared them, because deep down I knew one thing. No innocent explanation required years of secrecy. A week later, I drove there. I told nobody, not even my closest friend. The property sat in an upscale neighborhood nearly 40 minutes away from our home. It wasn't enormous, but it was beautiful, private, elegant, and very expensive. The kind of place someone buys for a second life. I parked across the street. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Part of me prayed I had misunderstood everything. Part of me begged for some simple explanation. Then the front door opened, and my world cracked. Vanessa walked out. Not visiting, not stopping by, living there. She carried groceries inside like someone completely comfortable in the space, like someone who belonged there. I sat frozen behind the wheel, unable to move, unable to think, unable to accept what I was seeing. Minutes later, another car arrived, where Ethan stepped out. He wasn't dressed for work. He wasn't meeting a client. He wasn't handling business. He walked directly toward the house, and before entering, he kissed Vanessa. Not casually, not ambiguously, not in a way that could be misunderstood. The kind of kiss shared by people who believed nobody was watching. The kind of kiss that destroys 20 years of trust in seconds. That was the first shocking emotional moment. I wish I could say I cried. I didn't. I felt strangely numb, as if my mind refused to process the reality unfolding in front of me. The two people I trusted most had been lying to me. Not for weeks, not for months, for years. And somehow I was the last person to know. I drove home in silence. I remember every traffic light, every turn, every mile. But I don't remember feeling human, and only empty. The hardest part wasn't discovering the affair. The hardest part was realizing how many memories had become lies. Every family vacation, every holiday photo, every celebration, every smile. How many of those moments were real? How many were performances? How many times had they looked at each other while I sat between them, completely unaware? Questions multiplied faster than answers, and each answer hurt worse than the last. For several days, I lived like a ghost. Ethan noticed nothing. That alone told me everything. A husband truly connected to his wife would have sensed something, but Ethan wasn't paying attention. His attention belonged elsewhere. Then I made a decision. I would not confront them, not yet. People reveal more when they believe they're safe. So I stayed quiet, and I started digging. And what I discovered next was even worse than the affair. The property wasn't Ethan's only secret. There were others, many others. Hidden accounts, questionable transfers, large withdrawals, financial arrangements that made no sense. The deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Ethan wasn't simply cheating. He was preparing for something big, something final. Then came the second major twist. The hidden property wasn't in Vanessa's name. It wasn't in Ethan's name either. It was owned through a company partially funded using money that originally came from my inheritance. The inheritance my grandfather left me decades earlier. The inheritance that helped launch Ethan's business. The inheritance he repeatedly referred to as our investment, except it was never really ours. Legally, it remained mine, and Ethan knew that, which explained why so much of what he was doing happened in secret. Because if I discovered it, questions would follow, questions he couldn't answer. I hired a forensic accountant, quietly, carefully, professionally. What that investigation uncovered made me physically sick. Over several years, millions of dollars had been moved through a network of accounts, not illegally, but deceptively, designed to hide assets, designed to protect wealth, designed to prepare for divorce. That realization hit harder than the affair. Because affairs can begin with temptation, but financial betrayal requires planning, calculation, intent. It meant Ethan had been preparing to leave long before I suspected anything. Every anniversary, every promise, every vacation. In every "I love you," all while secretly building an escape route. Comment-worthy moment number 2. What hurts more? Discovering your spouse is cheating, or discovering they've been planning your replacement for years? I honestly didn't know, and I wasn't finished learning the truth. The accountant eventually uncovered another shocking detail. Vanessa wasn't a victim. She never had been. Many of the debts she claimed were destroying her life had already been paid long before she moved in with us. Some had never existed at all. Large portions of her story were fabricated. She had manipulated sympathy from everyone around her, including me, especially me. I remembered every night I comforted her, every bill I covered, every sacrifice I made. And suddenly those memories transformed into evidence of manipulation. The woman I rescued had been using me from the beginning. The realization shattered something inside me. Not trust, something deeper. My belief in my own judgment. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? Those questions haunted me daily. Then something happened that answered them. One afternoon, I received an anonymous email. No greeting, no signature, only photographs, dozens of them. Photos of Ethan and Vanessa together, at restaurants, at resorts, at events. Some stretch back nearly 6 years, 6 years, 6 years of lies, 6 years of deception, 6 years of betrayal happening right under my nose. Who sent the email? I had no idea, but whoever it was had access, serious access. The final image nearly stopped my heart. It showed Ethan and Vanessa standing in front of the secret property, holding champagne glasses, celebrating. The date stamp matched our 19th wedding anniversary. While I spent that evening alone at home waiting for Ethan to return from a supposed business dinner, he had been celebrating with her. That was shocking emotional moment number 2. I stared at the photograph for hours, not crying, not screaming, just staring, trying to understand how someone could become so cruel. Because cheating is one thing, humiliating someone while they remain loyal is something else entirely. Yet the biggest shock was still coming. The anonymous sender emailed again 3 days later. This time there was only one sentence. Check the will. That message consumed me. What will? Whose will? Why would it matter? The answer arrived sooner than expected. My grandfather's estate attorney contacted me regarding routine updates to several family documents. During that meeting, an unexpected conversation changed everything. Years earlier, my grandfather had created legal protections around certain assets. Protections I barely remembered. At the time, they seemed unnecessary. Now they became incredibly important, because those protections prevented inherited family property from automatically becoming marital property, including several valuable real estate holdings, including one particular estate worth millions. And suddenly I understood something. Ethan wasn't just planning divorce, he was expecting a fortune he mistakenly believed he could access. The pieces finally connected. The affair, the secret accounts, the hidden property, the financial restructuring, the long-term planning. It wasn't just about love, it was about money. The realization transformed my grief into clarity. For months, I had viewed myself as the victim of a romantic betrayal. But this was bigger, much bigger. I wasn't being replaced. I was being targeted. And Ethan had spent years positioning himself for the reward. Comment-worthy moment number 3. Do you think Ethan ever truly loved me? Or was the money always the endgame? That's a question I wrestled with every day. Then the answer found me, and it came from the one person I least expected. The anonymous sender finally revealed themselves. It was Ethan's business partner, a man named Michael, someone I had known for almost 2 decades, someone who had watched everything unfold from a distance. Michael confessed he had remained silent for years, partly out of loyalty, partly out of fear. But recently Ethan had crossed a line, a dangerous line, one involving fraudulent business representations and plans that could potentially destroy innocent people. Michael couldn't stay silent anymore. According to him, Ethan wasn't planning a future with Vanessa. He was planning an exit strategy. Once the divorce finalized and certain assets were secured, Ethan intended to remove several people from his life, including Vanessa, including Michael, anyone who had become inconvenient. The affair wasn't a love story, it was a partnership built on greed, and greed eventually turns on itself. That was the third shocking emotional moment, because Vanessa had betrayed me, but she had also been betrayed herself. And neither of them knew it yet. Meanwhile, I knew everything. Or so I thought, because one final truth remained hidden, a truth that would make that future dinner table confrontation unforgettable. And when it surfaced, Ethan's entire world would collapse in front of everyone he cared about. The trap he spent years building for me was about to become the trap that destroyed him. By the time Ethan placed those divorce papers in front of me, I already knew more about his life than he realized. I knew about Vanessa, I knew about the hidden property, I knew about the accounts, I knew about the years of deception. Most importantly, I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted me embarrassed. He wanted me cornered. He wanted me emotional. People like Ethan make their biggest mistakes when they believe they've already won. And on that night, he believed victory was sitting right in front of him. The dinner had been carefully arranged. Close friends, family members, business associates, just enough witnesses to maximize humiliation. At first, the evening felt strangely normal. Food arrived, wine was poured, people laughed. Meanwhile, I sat there knowing a storm was coming. Ethan barely looked at me. Vanessa sat only a few seats away, confident, relaxed, almost triumphant. It was remarkable how comfortable betrayal had made them. Then it happened. The envelope appeared. The divorce papers slid across the table. And just like that, 20 years of marriage officially ended, at least in Ethan's mind. I watched the room fall silent. People looked confused. Some looked shocked. Others seemed uncomfortable. Nobody knew what to say. And then Ethan started talking. Not angrily, not emotionally, calmly, carefully, like someone delivering a prepared speech. He described our marriage as something that had simply run its course. He described our separation as mutual, respectful, necessary. The lies flowed effortlessly. That was the frightening part, not the betrayal, the ease with which he rewrote history. He spoke as though we had both reached this decision together, as though I had been included, as though the previous 20 years could be reduced to a polite announcement over dinner. Then came the moment that made several guests visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa reached for his hand. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but it told everyone everything. A ripple moved through the room. Faces changed. Eyes widened. People started connecting dots. The truth was becoming visible, and Ethan still believed he controlled the narrative. That was when I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood something. The people who betray you often expect your pain to become their reward. My refusal to break was the first thing that unsettled him. I reached into my handbag, pulled out the thick envelope, and placed it beside the divorce papers. Then I pushed it toward him. The room watched, curious, confused, silent. Ethan opened the envelope. The confidence disappeared instantly. His face changed so dramatically that several people noticed. Inside was the deed to the family estate my grandfather had protected years earlier. The same property Ethan believed would eventually become part of the divorce settlement. The same property worth millions. The same property he had spent years positioning himself to access. Except there was one problem. 3 months earlier, after discovering the affair, I had legally transferred the estate into a protected family trust, exactly as my grandfather originally intended. Completely legal, completely valid, completely untouchable. The asset Ethan wanted most no longer existed in a form he could claim. For the first time all evening, he looked nervous. Comment-worthy moment number 4. If someone betrayed you for money, would losing the money be the perfect punishment? The answer arrived faster than anyone expected, because the deed was only the beginning. Ethan tried recovering, tried pretending nothing had changed, tried maintaining control. Then I revealed the second envelope. This one contained financial reports, forensic audits, much property records, transfer histories, years of hidden transactions, every secret account, every concealed movement of money, every effort to manipulate assets, documented, organized, verified. The silence around that table became suffocating. People stopped looking at me. Now they were staring at Ethan. The image he had spent decades building was cracking, and everyone could see it. Then came the twist nobody expected. Not even Vanessa. I revealed Michael's evidence, the photographs, the messages, the timeline. 6 years of betrayal, displayed in undeniable detail. Vanessa's expression shifted from confidence to panic, because for the first time she realized something. This wasn't a private divorce. The truth was public, and the audience included everyone whose respect she valued. Family members looked devastated. Friends looked disgusted. Business associates looked alarmed. Years of deception were collapsing in real time. But I wasn't finished, because neither Ethan nor Vanessa knew the biggest secret, the one piece of information that changed everything. I placed one final document on the table, a signed agreement involving the hidden property, the property where they had built their secret life, the property Ethan thought represented his future. Except it wasn't fully paid for. Not even close. Much of its financing relied on a series of business arrangements connected to Ethan's company. Arrangements already being investigated after Michael reported serious concerns. Without those arrangements, the property became a financial disaster, a burden instead of an asset, and a liability instead of a dream. The house they believed symbolized freedom was actually sinking beneath enormous obligations. The color drained from Vanessa's face, then from Ethan's. For years, they had been celebrating inside a fantasy. Now reality arrived, and reality was expensive. But the most devastating truth was still waiting. Weeks after that dinner, the consequences accelerated. The divorce process began. Financial investigators expanded their review. Several business partners distanced themselves from Ethan. Clients started leaving. Investors became cautious. Trust disappeared. And once trust disappears, success rarely survives for long. Meanwhile, Vanessa finally learned what Michael had already told me. Ethan had never intended to stay with her permanently. Evidence recovered from emails and financial planning documents made that painfully clear. She wasn't his soulmate. She was his transition plan, a convenient partner during his exit strategy, someone useful until she wasn't. The woman who helped destroy my marriage discovered she had also been deceived. For years. Comment-worthy moment number 5. Do you feel sorry for someone who helps betray another person and then gets betrayed themselves? Many people disagreed. Some felt she deserved sympathy. Others felt she deserved consequences. I understood both sides, but I no longer had energy for revenge. Life was already delivering its own verdict. Several months later, Vanessa left. Not triumphantly, not victoriously, quietly. The relationship she sacrificed everything for eventually collapsed beneath the weight of mistrust. How could it survive? Neither of them trusted each other. Neither of them respected loyalty. Their entire foundation was built on deception, and deception is a terrible foundation for love. Meanwhile, Ethan's world continued shrinking. The man who once commanded rooms now struggled to keep people in them. The friends who admired him disappeared. The business opportunities slowed. The reputation he spent decades building dissolved piece by piece. Not because I destroyed it, because the truth did. That distinction mattered to me. I never wanted revenge. I wanted reality. And reality finally arrived. About a year after the divorce, something happened that surprised everyone, including me. I was happy, not performative happiness, not forced positivity, real happiness. In the kind that returns slowly after surviving devastation. The kind that feels impossible when you're standing in the middle of heartbreak. For a long time, I believed losing my marriage was the tragedy. Then I realized something important. The tragedy wasn't losing people who betrayed me. The tragedy would have been spending the rest of my life believing they deserved my trust. Once I understood that, healing became possible. I started traveling, reconnecting with old friends, pursuing dreams I had postponed for years, building a life that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time in decades, I felt free. One afternoon, while walking through the family estate my grandfather loved so much, I found myself thinking about the night of the divorce dinner, the night Ethan expected my humiliation, the night Vanessa expected victory, the night everyone thought my world was ending. Funny enough, that was actually the night my new life began, because betrayal has a strange way of revealing hidden truths. Not only about the people who hurt us, about ourselves. I learned I was stronger than I imagined, smarter than they believed, more resilient than they expected, and far more capable of surviving loss than I ever knew. Years later, people still ask whether I regret anything. My answer surprises them. I regret trusting blindly. I regret ignoring obvious warning signs. I regret doubting my instincts. But I do not regret loving sincerely, because honesty was never my weakness. Their dishonesty was theirs. That's an important difference. The final irony is this. Ethan thought the deed represented money, property, wealth, victory. To me, it represented something entirely different. Freedom. The moment I handed him that document wasn't the moment I defeated him. It was the moment I stopped allowing him to define my future. The greatest justice wasn't watching him lose everything. The greatest justice was realizing his choices no longer controlled my happiness. And that is how the man who served me divorce papers at dinner discovered too late that the woman he underestimated had already written the ending. Not with revenge, not with anger, but with truth. And in the end, truth truth took everything his lies had spent years building, while giving me back something far more valuable: my life.